All right, so let's get into this. I've been told this my whole creative career is that it is not good to do more than one thing. That you should only do one thing. I think that's hogwash myself. I look at people like Richard Branson. I look at people like Rich Redman. I look at people like Oprah. Like anybody. Just look at what they're doing. And of course, the more money, the more freedom it allows you to do some of those things. But it is okay to do more than one thing. In fact, there was a time when as a business owner, they said you should not do more than one thing, and now it's come to a point where they're telling you to have like multiple streams of income. And that's because they're realizing that things are in a dip, and especially as a creative, things are in a dip many times, and there might be one month where there's no work, the next month you're busy, and so forth and so on. And so you need to make sure that you always have irons in the fire that will help steady out that income. And for creatives, a lot of times that means doing multiple things. And like I said, I've been told this my whole life. So let's look at some of the positives of doing, because I know there's lots of you that are like this. I've got a lot of artist friends. They write, they're artists, they play in bands, they, do all kinds of stuff, right? So there's lots of people doing this. So let's look at some of the positives. The first thing is multiple sources of income. Okay, so the good thing is that if it's slow one area, and this is like for me, so just to give you an idea of what I've got my art business, which is caricatures and events, illustration, studio illustration, uh, two podcasts, television show, and my wife does English French translation and consulting work if I take it on. So not all of those make the same amount of money. Some don't make money at all. Some are things that we like to do. So the art business makes good money. We have one podcast which makes income. We have another podcast which doesn't really make any income, and a television show that does make income. Translation business makes income. So some of those are projects that I like to do. We have book sales which bring in some income, but not a lot of income. And so it's up and down. But when our art business is slow in the wintertime, a lot of times that's when the podcasts are busy. So, if you're covering events, that kind of thing, it's up and down. So from a workflow standpoint, it's good. From an income standpoint, it's helpful. So, think about it for you. What can you create in your creative business to have multiple streams of income? Okay, so next thing is opportunities. All right, the nice thing about having multiple areas where I work in is that I get work from other opportunities. So if I was just an artist and I just dealt with art groups, I would only get so much business from artists. But because my art business and my podcast is in the trucking industry, and my other podcast is in the trucking industry, and my art business, I get business from the trucking industry because I'm the only artist. So some of the things cross over, and some of them actually create income models for me because I'm the only one in that area. Whereas if you went to somewhere else, you would be amongst a bunch of people. So multiple opportunities. So multiple income, multiple opportunities are really strong points for having multiple things going on. And of course, building a network. Because I go to different association meetings, because I go to different places, because I meet a lot of different types of people, I have a wider network than a lot of other people. If you're in one industry and you go to one type of event, you may know a lot of people in that way, but I know people in that way. I also know people in my speaking business. I also know people in my in the trucking business. I also know people in the arts. I know people, on television, all because I have those multiple streams of income and work, which help to bring in which help to build my network, right? So it's kind of like social media. Think about social media. You have, if you're only on LinkedIn, you have LinkedIn, and you probably have a lot of people on LinkedIn. But if you have LinkedIn, you have Twitter, and you have Facebook, you have Instagram, you have YouTube, you have whatever, you can build a wider network. Good and bad, depending on what you're trying to do, right? But that's one way of doing it. So building a wider network. So those are the three positives that I see out of having multiple streams of income. Now let's get into the negatives. Your focus is diluted, right? Because you're doing too many different things. So, of course, having your attention split three ways is not going to be as focused or as good as if you have your attention on one thing. It's hard to put 100% into any effort, into any project, if you've got it divided over multiple things. And of course, it depletes your resources. If you're putting cash into 3 projects all at the same time, it takes your cash away. So so you've got to think about what you're doing when you're doing it. But here's some tips to help you. Okay, so if you're working in multiple areas at a time, the way that I am, here's a few tips that can really help you. First of all, improve your time management skills. When you're doing multiple things, you have to get very good at time management. So when I say do multiple things, I don't mean do them at the same time. You may work on one project one day and another project the next day or whatever, or split up over a week or however you want to split it up. But get very good with your time management. And that's for basic things like answering emails and correspondence and all that. Have set times each day where you can do that. For me, recording, right? I'm always batch recording and those kind of things because that's the only way I would get it done. If this was a live radio show, I would probably not get it done unless it was my only source of income because of the time commitment. Prioritize your projects, right? So prioritizing and knowing which was more important. So you might have 3 projects going on, but that doesn't mean they're all of the same importance. So when you look at mine, we've got our art business, we've got my podcast for truck drivers, my podcast for creative entrepreneurs, my television show. Okay, those are the 4 that I have to take care of. But the art business, excuse me, the art business is my wife does all the booking, so I don't have to be in there every minute, only when I get booked. My podcast for truck drivers, that takes a lot of my time, but that's a priority because we make income. So those 2 are our priorities because they're the income generating ones. Now my podcast for creative entrepreneurs and the television show don't make any income. They're less of a priority. Doesn't mean they're less of importance. They're just less of a priority. I still need to make them happen, but it's not something that I'm hoping I don't have to worry about. Now, the television show, I batch record that. So I batch it goes in seasons. So it's not something that's all year long. And the other podcast is 1 episode a week, whereas my other one is 2 episodes a week. So I have time to do that and maintain it. And then, of course, the translation is whenever my wife gets that work. So prioritize your projects. So improve your time management, prioritize your projects, and diffuse the projects. So do not start them all at the same time. Do not work on them all at the same time. Categorize them, have them so they start at certain times or you work on them certain times of the week is a good way to prioritize and make sure that you are not, you're focused on the one at hand at the time you're doing it. There's nothing wrong with doing multiples. Just make sure you're focused at the one on hand when you do it. And then, of course, outsourcing. So outsource anything that you actually don't need to do or it doesn't need you specifically. So on air, it'd be hard for someone else to do this because it's my expertise, but I can get someone else to do my admin or I can get someone else to do my editing or those kind of things. So, or outsourcing. So for tips for if you're going to work multiple things at the same time, and many artists do this, creatives do this all the time. They have an album going in and they're working on some other song. Painters are working on a book and they're working on this. It's not uncommon. So it's a good way to do this. So tips are improve your time management, prioritize your projects. Don't start all the projects at the same time. Work on them at different times so you can give each one the focus it deserves. And then outsource any areas that do not require you to be specifically there. That is a good way to do it. As far as the positives, it gives you multiple sources of income, which are important. You get multiple opportunities, and you build a very large network. All positive things when you're a creative entrepreneur. And then the negatives, yeah, it can take away your cash flow, it can take away your attention, and it could, possibly have it hard so you're not actually giving it 100%. But I think if you take those tips and you do what I suggest and you put them all in a certain way, you can do it. I know I've been doing it for years. I've had people say you should only do one thing. That's hogwash. Do what you want. Hope you enjoyed that.